Good morning, YouTube. Today I want to talk about 9 things that Doug DeMuro got wrong about the Ferrari F430.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan and we are at my dealership. This is the Stub and our dealership is NG Supercars, and this Ferrari F430 we are currently converting into a manual using a Cambio Manuale kit, and it's going to be for sale very shortly. So if you're interested, reach out to us, sales@ngsupercars.com. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Doug DeMuro got a few things wrong. Well, okay, so some of these things are more of like an asterisk. So let's go over some of these things because, well, there's already enough false things about these Ferraris out there and I hate hearing them, so let's correct some of these things. Okay, so the first thing is that he said that they were made until 2010.
From 2005 through 2010.
And, well, as far as I can tell, that is not correct. They only made these until 2009. The Scuderia was only available in 2008 and 2009. 430 Coupes and the 430 Spiders were made from 2005 until 2009. Now I should say that's model year, so I don't know if that means that maybe they actually manufactured some of these in 2010. I don't know. I guess the question would be, does anyone own a 2010 Ferrari F430 that's registered as a 2010? If so, feel free to put it in the comments below. But 2010 is when they started making the Ferrari 458. As far as I know, I think they actually released these in 2009 in Europe, but only in 2010 in the US. So again, who knows? Ferrari does some weird stuff, so whatever. Okay, the second thing is he kept saying that it was a transmission swap from the F1 system to the manuals.
And so the transmission swaps are starting to become desirable.
You've got your flappy pedals here, and those are gonna go away, and well, you've got the transmission right under here. Now, I don't like hearing the term transmission swap. I think it's a conversion. Now, when you think of a swap, you think of removing the transmission and then putting in a new transmission, and that is not accurate. To do one of these conversions, it is the same transmission. So the way that these F1 transmissions work, it's actually a single clutch transmission. Is you've got a pump right there, you've got a hydraulic reservoir, and then you've got all of these different hydraulic lines and actuators that run down into a device that's right underneath this heat shield right here. And that effectively acts as the shifting mechanism. So it actually shifts the forks in the transmission, selecting the different gears. There's also another hydraulic line that runs up there. You can actually see it right here, this line going right down there. That goes into the clutch and actuates the release bearing, so it opens and closes the clutch so it can actually shift gears. So all of that is controlled through hydraulics, this pump right here and these lines and all this stuff right here. So when you do a conversion, well, there's different options, right? One is you can actually delete the E-diff and remove all of the hydraulics, but more common option is you actually leave in the hydraulics because you keep the E-diff, and then all you do is remove the hydraulics to do the actuators and the clutch. Now obviously there's a bunch of computer stuff that goes with it, and of course adding a clutch pedal and shifting mechanisms and all that stuff, so there's a lot more to it than that. But yeah, it's not a swap, it is a conversion. So speaking of conversions, he pointed out that you could tell that it was a conversion because of the holes in the steering column.
But the holes that were there are still in place.
Now, this is not so much he was wrong about it, it's more of a correction, I would say, which is that it depends on which conversion kit you get. So some of the kits have plugs that go in those holes, some of them do not. Obviously the one that particular car had in his video did not have the holes blocked off, so you can actually see them. The Cambio Manuale kit does have little blocks that you put in there, so it looks cleaner. You know, you don't have these little weird holes sitting there. You obviously could actually replace that entire clamshell, but those are expensive, so most of the time people do not do that. All right, we've crawled into the 430 and he talked about the screen right there.
When this car is on and running, you can see this screen has everything illuminated.
Okay, so you're talking about this screen right there. Right now it says it's in neutral. When you do a conversion, there's different things that happen depending, again, on the kit that you do the conversion with. Some kits completely disable it, some kits it does some limited functionality, but the common misconception is that that screen is somehow either saying the gear when it's a manual, or that it's not even there at all in an OEM manual, and that is not true. That screen is always there In the OE cars, it is just not activated. As far as I'm aware, none of the cars, period, when they are manuals, it tells you what gear it's in. Now, that is a function of the F1 system. So it would not, since you're removing that system, they would not show the gear. So, if I put my foot on the brake and pull the pedal, you can see now it says that we're in first gear. So that's the gear indicator. And then it's got little tiny arrows that are supposed to tell you when to shift up and down. Like no one pays attention to those. So another thing I want to point out about the conversions, another way I should say that you can tell that it is a conversion is you've got the shift plate right here. It'll be taking up this space. Now, if it is an OE car, there'll be a little Ferrari Cavallino, the horse, in the upper left corner. Now, none of the conversion companies are allowed to put that Cavallino because it is a trademark on the plate. Now, you can have an artist engrave it technically because then it's considered art if it's commissioned, but you can't have where a company is selling it for a profit. It gets weird and legal and blah, blah. Don't take this as legal advice. A lot of the people have bought one of the OE gates and put that there. So it's not a 100% foolproof way to tell whether it's conversion or not, but if you see the Cavallino there, it is more likely OE than not. If you don't see a Cavallino there, then it's almost guaranteed to be a conversion. And that's not always true because so many people have OE cars and their gate has been messed up or whatever, and they've actually replaced it with an aftermarket one. So again, there is no hard rule on this one, but that is one of the ways that you can usually tell. So here's another thing that he discussed, which is these switches not being activated unless the key is on.
The bizarre controls that only work when the car is running.
And well, this is one of those where it's not that simple. It's not that straightforward. So yes, to activate the glove box, I've got the key in, it's forward. If I push the button, glove box opens. Take the key and turn it off. And now that it's off, if we push the button, you can see it does not open. Now, the logic is that if you have a Spider, you might be parking it somewhere with the convertible top down, and you don't want someone to be able to just walk up, push the button, and steal whatever's in your glove box. That's also why in the Spider, you cannot activate the little rear trap door. The coupes don't have it, but the Spiders do. You can't activate that unless the key is on. And that is also true about the frunk. But this is a coupe. So in the coupes, notice it is off. You can pop the trunk, and it does actually work. So that is a Spider thing. If you have a Spider, it will not pop the trunk unless the key is on. Now, strangely enough, again, it changed, I believe, between the different years. I think 05 and 06, you can flick this with it off. In 07's later, you cannot pop the fuel door unless it is on. Very weird stuff. Again, this is just some Ferrariisms, but it kind of makes some sense because of the Spider part of the equation. Speaking of weird things based on year, if I put the key back in. So this car is an 07, you notice that it says park. Well, somewhere in the 07 year when they changed over the cars to a different system, it changed from park to just a P. So yeah, that's the parking brake. I don't know why. The dashboard changed just ever so slightly. Whatever, but that's another thing. Speaking of other anomalies between different years, somewhere in the 07 range is when they changed the gearbox TCU. So there's two different TCUs that operate the F1 transmission in this car. There is the 231, which is what they use in the 05, 06, and part of 07. So somewhere in the 2007 range is when they changed the TCUs to the 301. So it's not a big deal. They both operate pretty well. Some people say you can feel a slight difference. I think you can. In the 301, it's slightly better. But what you have to be careful of is if you're checking on like clutch wear or any of that sort of stuff with the computer and you plug it in, you have to make sure that you've got the right transmission selected when looking at the data, because it will be wrong if you use the wrong computer operations on the wrong TCU. And finally, in the interior, the last thing is he keeps talking about this off button. He points this out in a lot of the Ferraris, and he says this button does nothing in the video.
One of the buttons says off, but that button has no apparent purpose.
And that is completely false. This button turns on and off the air conditioning compressor. So when you push it in, it's off, meaning the AC compressor does not run. If you have it out, which is kind of like the default position, the AC compressor is on and running. Now, I know in most cars, they have a button that just says AC, and you push it and it turns on the AC, and you push it again, it turns off the AC. Theirs, for some reason, just says off. Now, that's a very strange way of saying it, but it does actually make sense. It's saying turn off the AC, that way you don't run it. So, for example, if you're in a colder climate and you want heat, you would push this off and you'd turn up the heat. If you're in a warm climate and you want AC, you would push this out and turn this down. And if you just wanted to have ambient air temperature, you might turn this in the middle and push it off, and then it's just going to vent just like a regular, car. So there you go. It's not that complicated. I don't know why he loves to beat up on the off button on these Ferraris. I guess it's just the wording is, well, it's strange. It's a Ferrarism. So the last thing that he mentioned that I wanted to discuss is the engine evolution. So Doug mentioned that Ferrari has traditionally done like a 2-model cycle where they have a new model completely, and then halfway through they evolve that model. So it's usually about a 5-year run, although again, this is Ferrari, nothing's consistent. So you start way back with like the 308, and actually they ran it for more than 5 years, and then it became the 328. So then the engine evolved, but the looks kind of were the same. Then came out the 348, which again, totally different platform. The engine evolved. They came out with the 355, which again was just an evolution of the engine and the looks, but pretty much the same platform. Then came to 360, again a engine evolution, big change on the chassis. It was their first all aluminum chassis, and then they evolved it further with the new engine in the Ferrari F430, again 5 more-ish years. Then came the Ferrari 458. Now here's again where they did another departure from the tradition. They ran that for a while, totally new engine again. And then they did the 488, which basically is the same platform, turbocharged engine, completely different engine. And then they did the F8, which is still the same platform, so they actually ran 3 generations off of basically the same platform. The engine in the 308 all the way through the 360 is effectively the same engine, just evolved. Okay, it's the same basic design. They made it bigger, they changed the heads, they changed the technology behind it, changed whatever, but it's effectively the same basic design. Then came the 430. So this is the F136 engine. The 308 through 360 used the, what is it called? The F131, I think. Yeah, that's it. I have notes. So it was the F131 from the 308 through the 360, which was actually, they called like the Dino engine. They actually also had variants of it that were 6 cylinders that were in the Dino 246. So this is an engine that was originally designed in the 60s all the way until 2005 they were using it. Now this engine comes out, complete departure, totally new, has timing chains, no timing belts, so you no longer have the traditional Ferrari major service where you have to pull the engine out or replace the timing belts every few years or every 20-ish thousand miles. This one, no, none of that. Timing chains last for a long time. So what's unusual is they didn't really use this engine all that long. So they used it in the Ferrari F430 and the Ferrari California. It's basically the same engine. Now there are variants of this engine that are in Maseratis and some other cars, but they usually have like a cross-plane crank instead of flat-plane crank. That's why they don't rev as high and they sound more of a muscle car than like the Italian thing. Then they took the engine and evolved it into the 458 engine. So it's basically the same engine in the 2 cars, but big difference is that is direct injection. And that made a huge increase in horsepower and its ability to go to 9,000 RPMs instead of 8,500 RPMs. That is partly why you hear such a dramatic difference in the sound between the 360 and the 430, because the 360 had the 5-valve per cylinder F131 block, which is the same basic thing that's in the 355, although again, changed a little bit. And this one is the 4.3 liter F430, the F136 block, which is, again, very different. So it's kind of cool to hear about all these history, the history and how these things evolved and why they are the way they are and all that stuff. This is one of my favorite cars of all time. It's pretty much, in my opinion, one of the best Ferraris of all time, although I will say, I actually think the 458 is a little better, but the 458 is a lot more expensive. And here's the other thing. Once these are manuals, whew, these are really, really good cars as manuals. He did get that right. This car as a manual is just truly incredible. It is one of the best cars of all time, one of the best driving experiences of all time. With that being said, it is for sale through our dealership, NG Supercars. Hit us up. Go check out ngsupercars.com. You can also buy parts and services from us at normalguysupercar.com. That's going to do it for this video. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for watching. We do appreciate it if you guys could hit that like button and subscribe. So we'll see you in the next video. We're going to be doing a lot of cool car stuff. You're going to want to stay tuned. It's going to be sweet.